The following is a program of the Santa Barbara County Education Office. To learn more, visit sbceo.org.
I'm Susan Salcido, Santa Barbara County Superintendent of Schools, and I am so delighted to welcome and introduce my guest today, Ben Heighes, who since 1992 has been the news director of KUHL Radio here in Santa Maria. Ben, thank you so much for joining us today.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. I can't wait to share with our viewers about your story and a bit of your background. They all know you because they wake up hearing your voice in the morning on the radio for sure. You really are a voice of Santa Maria, but we want to know more about you, so we get a chance to uncover some of that history today.
All right, I'll explain as much as I can.
You got it. All right. So let's start at the beginning. Let's talk about where you were born and brought up, your childhood, and some of the schools you attended.
Well, I was born in Santa Barbara, so 1970. I went to a lot of schools. We moved around quite a bit, so I attend a lot of different schools there in Santa Barbara. Cleveland School was one. I think Monroe was another school. Isla Vista Elementary School, so that was probably about the 6th grade. At that time, my family and I were living in a studio in Isla Vista, and that was getting really expensive, and not to mention it was kind of the college community there, so that was the time that my family decided to move and buy a house up in Santa Maria, so we did that, and we moved in the middle of the school year, so that was about Christmas of 1982, and so my mom was getting a job up in Santa Maria, but her place of employment that she worked, which was Santa Barbara Research, the building wasn't quite ready yet, so we decided that I would finish my 7th grade at Goleta Valley Junior High School, and Mom would continue working in Santa Barbara where she was, so Monday through Friday we commuted from Santa Maria to Santa Barbara every day.
Wow.
So we had to get up about 5:30 in the morning and drive down there and then come back home usually by 4 or 5 o'clock. I had to wait for my mom in the car after I finished school until she finished work about 4:30, and then we would drive home, and we did that Monday through Friday.
Long days for you.
Yeah.
Really long days for you.
So I think that's how I got my mornings started there a little bit.
That's right.
Yeah.
It started right back in elementary school and
Yeah.
junior high. Interesting.
Yep.
And so you came up to Santa Maria. You obviously finished 7th grade, it sounds like, at Goleta Valley Junior High, and attended a different junior high here in Santa Maria. We have that in common.
Yeah.
And tell everybody where you went to junior high here in Santa Maria and high school.
That would be El Camino Junior High, and I know that you are an alum.
That's
so,
right. Go Titans.
Go Titans. So I finished 8th grade there, and then went to Santa Maria High School, and I graduated the class of 1988. So I was able to attend school, and I decided not to go to college by the time I was about 17. I was still in high school, but I wound up getting a job at a radio station, which we can maybe talk about in a few minutes about how that happened. But I decided at that point that I was pretty much doing what I wanted to do, and I decided not to go to college. I thought maybe, later on after that happened, it's like, well, maybe I should have gone to college, but I was learning already quite a number of things.
Yes, and found your calling, that is for sure, and you're so good at it, and I think the community is really fortunate to have you in this community as a voice of Santa Maria.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So as you were growing up, you talked about moving around a lot, lots of different ways in which you learned about working hard and working early in the morning. What were some of your professional aspirations? What did you want to do when you grew up?
Well, at one point I wanted to be a firefighter. I used to watch a TV show, and I thought maybe the firefighting field might have been something for me, and I think for a while maybe I wanted to be a police officer. I took drafting in high school, so there was a lot of those possibilities, but the whole radio thing, I was really into music, and so when I first started getting into radio and my interest in it was really because of the music, and I just wanted to play music, and the whole news thing kind of came along, and we can maybe talk about that, but that was kind of almost accidental that happened, and I've been doing that for 26 years.
Well, let's go right into that. Tell
Sure.
us how that happened. What was accidental and what was purposeful?
Well, when I first started radio, I started actually DJing, so I was doing air shifts and that sort of thing. So I worked for an oldie station, I worked for a country radio station, I did oldies for a while. And then the news thing, I was working at, I guess it would be KXFM, KUHL, when those two stations were together, and this was probably about 1991, 92. And the news director there had been let go, and I was working production, which is kind of the responsibility, to produce commercials and that sort of thing. And so the owners decided to put me in, and they asked me if I would be interested in doing a news program in the morning, and I said, well, I haven't really thought of that before, so I'll give it a try. And so that was 26 years ago.
Incredible.
So, yeah, and I just kind of fell in love with it, and the fact that you're up to date on what's going on, current events and that sort of thing. But that's kind of how that whole thing happened. Was there was an opening, and I thought I'd try it.
So something that you said a couple of moments ago, two things. One has to do with your love of music and your record collecting.
Right.
And my understanding is that that is another something that maybe was influenced by your mother. I think your mother played a lot of music as you were a child growing up, and you collected music, is my understanding.
Yeah, I guess to put that in the right order, when I was about 5 or 6, I found Mom's record collection, which was basically a lot of 45s in a box that she had, some old Beatles records and things like that she had collected. And so that's how I kind of got into music. And then my parents bought me a transistor radio when I was about 6 or 7 years old, and I just became fascinated with that. And that stuck with me ever since. I used to think people, that were on the radio actually lived at the radio station. Now I know they do. But that's kind of how that whole thing started. Yeah.
Now, I also read something about you having an FM station, or maybe it was an AM station. I think it was only broadcast maybe a block or
Right.
so. Tell us about that. That's fascinating as well.
Well, I don't know if your viewers might be familiar with Mr. Microphone many years ago,
Okay.
but this allowed people to, have the, if you buy the microphone, you can broadcast on an empty FM signal. And so that's what I did, and I actually configured it where I put the microphone into a speaker box, and I was able to mix music and talk, and that was probably when I was about 14 or 15. It only went a block, so I had a very faithful neighbor that listened, but that was about it. But that's how I kind of trained myself. I taught myself how to program music, do commercials, read the sports and news and that sort of thing. And from that, probably about maybe when I was 15 or 16, Santa Maria High School used to have a newspaper that they actually sent a reporter over to the house, and they took a picture after they found out about what I was doing. And then my dad is the one that suggested that, why don't I take that article and send it to some of the radio stations around town and see if anybody would hire me. And I did that. And I only heard back from one, and that's the one that actually hired me. So
I love it.
Yeah.
I love that story. And, I want to pause and just say to you and also to our viewers, having been in your studio just a few times now so far, but, the skill with which you work on the radio and all of the myriad things that you have to do to make radio happen and come to life is just truly magical. You're so, so talented. I believe. And if anyone were to walk into your studio or be a fly on the wall, they would see the same thing I know that I see as well. You're really, really so, so good.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And I say that because I think part of that comes from truly your skill and your passion and your ability to do it. But I also think it comes from what you just described earlier, which is working from the ground up. I mean, you really started with something very small and made it into something really big and really with a legacy. So I just want to compliment you and pause and say how much that means to the community, truly.
Great, thank you. Well, hopefully I've learned a few things along the way about maybe, what to do and maybe not what to do.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
yeah.
Well, clearly you've learned a lot.
Yeah.
And Ben, somebody with your skill and talent, truly, and your professionalism, I think could have gone anywhere. You can, oftentimes broadcasters will go from one studio that's maybe small audience to a lot broader audience. But for you, it's really been something that you've valued, to stay in Santa Maria. And can you say a little bit more about why that is for you? so important around staying here in Santa Maria Valley?
This is pretty much home for me. I mean, like I mentioned, I was born in Santa Barbara, and so Santa Maria was the place that I kind of grew up, and so this is just kind of like being, at home with family members and that sort of thing. I always thought about maybe moving on, but it just wasn't the same, dealing with, LA traffic and that sort of thing. But Santa Maria's always been home to me, so.
Well, I think everyone here truly loves you and values you as a community member. They probably also ask you for a lot of information when you're out in the street. Ben, what do you know about this? Ben, what do you know about that?
Oh, sure. But that's okay. I mean, I don't mind doing that. And, if I don't know the answer, I'll certainly tell them that, or I can, tell them, well, I'll have to get back to you. And I think I know the person that can answer this, so I try to do that as best I can.
That's great.
Yeah.
Which leads me to another question, because as somebody who's being on the radio, a news director, you're clearly a communicator. I mean, that is something that you do. But I think you're also a connector, which is what you were saying, kind of connecting people to information.
Yeah.
One thing that's unique about your show, Ben, in the morning, is the on-air interviews that you have and conduct. You have lots of different people come in from the community to be on air with interviews, myself included.
Sure.
But is that something that you created as part of your show, and why is that part of your show? Why do you think that's important to have on-air interviews?
Well, I think, doing news stories with actualities is certainly one angle of doing a story. Having a live in-studio interview, talking to somebody that maybe the story is about, or they might have direct connection, helps kind of, it's like another dimension of that story, so that I feel that those on-air interviews are important. As we're talking now, it's the middle of the political season. Of course, there's an election coming up also in November, so I think it's important to interview those that are running for office, but we're also faced with that challenge, that back in June, we had the situation with 27 people running for governor. So we always try to give somebody the same opportunity as the other candidates, but when you have 27 people running, that makes it really difficult. So we try to do the best we can, but having that on-air interviews, like I said, having another dimension to like a news story or something that you're trying to cover.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely a different dimension, and connecting the community with community members. I think it's a really powerful piece of your show.
Yeah.
And let's talk a little bit about partnerships, because you also bring in businesses, you bring in, other than politicians, for example, or community leaders, there are other leaders in different ways, like businesses, I think, that you partner with. Can you say a little bit more about what you're doing there?
Sure. Since we are a for-profit radio station, we do have advertisers, so occasionally we'll have a business that comes in, maybe the owner. We had one recently that just opened, so we had him on the phone, and he talked about the services that he provides. And then we also did kind of a giveaway connected with that too. So that's something else that we can do, help promote the business. People can find out a little bit more about what that owner can provide, and then maybe do a giveaway for someone, maybe for an opportunity for them to try out that business if they haven't already.
That's great. Lots of connections with
Yes.
businesses as well. So Ben, you graduated high school in 1988, you said. You really started work in the radio business then. News director since 1992, which is now over 25 years, if you can believe that.
Yeah,
Can
I
you
can't.
believe
I
that?
can't.
No, I know.
Yeah.
But you've had an extensive career in journalism, news, broadcasting, and I have a burning question for you, which is, over that 25-year period plus, what are some of the big changes that you've seen? Maybe an arc that you can draw in terms of where it began and where it is today. That could be in terms of social media. It could be in terms of all kinds of different aspects.
Sure. When I first started at KUHL, we did not have the internet, so that was kind of a different thing. So kind of putting that in perspective, we did typing on the computer, but a lot of our news came from either making phone calls, checking in with the local police departments and that sort of thing. But that was, before the internet. And over time, we eventually did incorporate the internet into our newscasts, using it and getting the information a lot quicker, not having to make as many phone calls and that sort of thing. But we have to be careful with the internet because, just as we can get the information that fast, you can also get the information wrong just as fast. So, I mean, you still have to double check things, but when I first started, there was no internet. So, and at that point, we actually had quite a few people in the newsroom Now it's just pretty much me in the morning, and then I've got another fellow that comes in the afternoon. But that's probably one of the biggest things I can think that has changed in that time period.
It seems like that's a huge change. So the internet is now where you can really cull your information so that you can provide it to your listeners?
Yes, not only from the morning show that we do in the morning or the other newscasts during the day, but I also update Facebook. That's a big part on what we do, and people can go there if a newscast is not on the air, and they can actually get information from our Facebook page, which we advertise on our station. That if you want breaking news, you can go to the Facebook page and get that there.
And is that KUHL Facebook? It's KUHL?
It's probably the information station.
Okay.
Yeah, type in information station and you can find it there.
That's great.
Yeah.
So speaking of Facebook and social media, has that significantly changed your work?
It has. It's kind of like another layer to what I've been doing. Usually when I write news, it's specifically for the morning show. So once I'm done with the morning show, or even before, if something's happening, something happened overnight, then I can update the Facebook page before I go on the air at 6, or once I get done at 9 o'clock, something has happened during the show, then I can update the Facebook page there. And I can do that 24 hours. I can do it, 1 o'clock in the afternoon, 3 o'clock in the morning. So that's kind of the nice thing, and I don't always have to be at the studio to do that. Yeah.
And would you start at 6 o'clock in the morning? Is that what you said?
Yeah.
What time do you get up to get ready?
Well, it kind of depends. For the morning show, technically I'll get at the studio close to maybe 5:30, 5:40. I've actually done a lot of work the night before, so I work kind of a split. So to do the morning show, I do have to be there before the microphone goes on at 6:05, obviously. But if I work late the night before, then I maybe will sleep in a little bit, but that's kind of my schedule. And then I'm usually there till maybe 9:30 in the morning after the morning show, go home for a little while, come back. So it kind of varies, but I do have to be there from 6 to 9.
And you are so committed. I don't think there's ever a time that you weren't on the radio.
Vacation.
Okay, and that's about
Yeah,
it, and that's planned. So one other thing that has changed over time that if we can just talk about for a moment, we talked about social media, we talked about the arc of 25 years and the internet. I'm so curious about satellite radio. Has that changed your work at all, or if so, how?
Not really. I've actually seen some of the talk show hosts that we've had on our radio station before go on and kind of do their own thing on satellite radio. Howard Stern, people like that. But as far as local radio, we're still very local. We still do traffic updates, weather, current temperature. That's something that satellite radio really doesn't concentrate on. It's more because I've got friends that listen to satellite radio, but they're more into like 80s music and that sort of thing, where we're kind of doing something different, which is we're doing live radio interviews, traffic and weather. So
Right. Something else that I have seen and heard on your radio station is that you encourage listeners to call in.
Yes.
Tell us about a birthday. Tell us about events. Tell us about weather, right?
Yep.
So
yeah, we do a live segment in the morning. Everything's pretty much live in the morning. But listeners can call up if they've got like a birthday or anniversary wish, so they can do that, or if they're relaying some type of traffic situation, so we can do that live in the morning. So we do enjoy that listener interaction, yes.
I would imagine from where you sit at your studio, you've seen some really great things come and go. It's just it must be very, very, not only rewarding, hard work, challenging in many aspects too, but just feel good about what you're able to communicate to the listeners each day. What would you say are some of the best parts about working on the radio?
The best parts? Probably the people that I've met over the years, everything from city council members, mayors, county superintendent of schools, yourself included, Bill Cerrone, your predecessor. So probably the people that I've come to know over the years, that's probably the number one thing for me, yeah.
And what about some of the challenging aspects? Most people watching this show probably have not been in your seat, so they really don't know what would be the most challenging in terms of hosting a show and being a news director. What are some of those challenges?
Staying on top of everything, being current. You're trying to do a live show and then maybe something breaking is happening, so you're trying to stay on top. I use my cell phone in the morning, so sometimes I'll get updates from email or some other source that way, but probably staying up to date on current news events, making sure that things are accurate. A lot of times I don't have time to proofread anything, so I've got to do the best I can. So those are the challenging things about that, but that also kind of makes radio, that much more exciting. It's kind of like almost like living on the seat of your pants, I guess, right?
Right, yeah.
Okay.
So really being on the edge there,
Yep.
cutting edge of information.
Yep.
Yeah. And, Ben, as you were walking in the studio today, someone said, "Oh, he's a local celebrity." I'm sure you hear that all the time.
I do.
Yes, you do.
I want to know who they're talking about.
It's you.
Yeah.
You're the local celebrity. Everybody knows Ben Heighes, that's for sure. It's such an honor and privilege to sit across from you today. But my understanding is that many people, many groups and different people who are convening meetings want to have you speak at their meetings. They want you to present, give them information. What do you find are the reasons for which they would like to have you speak to their group? What do they want to know about Ben Heighes, the local celebrity?
Well, in the past, they want to know about radio, how it works and that sort of thing. In the past, I've also hosted some candidates forums, so I've done that for certain groups. So those are probably the things that come to mind a little bit. So maybe they just want to know about what happens. How do you get a radio show on the air? What do you do? What are your responsibilities? Those sort of things. Yeah.
And you're constantly being asked, I'm sure, to host and facilitate lots of different forums and meetings and events.
I do, and I unfortunately can't do them all, but I do what I can, yeah.
Yeah, well, everyone appreciates it when you're there, for sure. You elevate the meeting, for sure. And Ben, you get up really early in the morning, you prepare for your show, you have split days, you work at night. I mean, there's a lot that you're doing. How do you have a semblance of balance or get a little bit of calm in your day or week?
Usually during the day, I try to take some time off. I've got a chocolate lab that I walk on a daily basis, so that's a good time to sit there and kind of reflect a little bit. So I get some time in the afternoon. I take naps as much as I can. And then the weekends, usually I try to make work free. That doesn't always happen, but the weekends are a good time to kind of do some things with my family. So there is some time in there.
That's nice.
Yeah.
That's really good. I'm glad you find the time to have that balance.
I try.
That's great that you try. We all do, but you do it. That's great. And, there are some viewers today who might be thinking that they would be interested in a profession in radio or newscasting, a director of a show. What advice might you have for somebody who's up and coming or interested in your job?
Number one, probably hang out at a radio station. That might be something that they could do depending on where you live and if a station would allow you to do that. The other thing is maybe talk to high schools or community colleges, Hancock or Cal Poly. If you happen to be looking at those things for continuing your education, see what sorts of programs they offer. I'm not sure they still do the Columbia School of Broadcasting anymore, but I've known some people that have gone through that, so that's I guess another opportunity. But it's maybe get as much information as you can about the field, learn about the stations in your area, and call them and see if they have maybe like an internship or something like that. I mean, as much information as you can learn, maybe on the scene, seeing what they do is probably the best way to go.
I like that. That's
Yeah.
great advice. Ben, you're constantly communicating with the community. You're connecting the community with business partners and different people. You really have such a reach and impact throughout this community. I find it really incredible what you do and have done for so long, and for so many more years to come.
I hope so.
I know, and
Yeah.
we all hope so for sure. I'd like to give you an opportunity to share with the community any message that you have from Ben Heighes to the community. You have listeners each day, but this is a different sort of forum where you have viewers today. What is a message you would like to have the community know?
Sure, I think probably is, stay in touch and stay informed with what's happening in your community. There's lots of, big issues that are going on right now, whether it's concerns about racism or, who's in the White House. But, even with the elections going on this year, learn about the candidates and where they stand on the issues. So really get informed, try to help out at your local schools. That's something else. A lot of people have concerns about what's going on in schools right now, so maybe find some way of volunteering or helping out. and maybe do that sort of thing. That's what I would probably advise. Yeah.
The message around being informed and staying educated. I find that your messages through each morning that you're on the radio, you really are educating and informing your listeners. And when you have people on your show, live guests, who are sharing some information, it's usually about educating your listeners. It's really fascinating, Ben, that you do that each day. You really help keep everybody stay abreast with some of the major issues. I imagine that as you have your guests on and as you actually report out the news, you find yourself engaged and informed and educated on all the topics as well.
Definitely. I think it's kind of, me along with the listeners are learning at the same time. I don't always know everything about the subject that we're covering, but I think it's, if I can learn some facts, whether it's through an interview or some other source that I'm doing, so it's kind of like I'm learning along with the listeners, that I'm getting something out of it as well as the listeners are too, and I'm hopefully doing that through the interviews and the other things that we're doing.
Well, you definitely are. And in our field, in terms of education, we have a commonality, which is informing and educating. Yes. For sure. So I'm wondering, Ben, if you might have a message to students who might be listening to you and watching today, anything for our youth and youngsters to know from you as a voice in Santa Maria, as a resident for a long time, and somebody who's seen many, many different people come through your studio. What's something that you think students might really need to know?
Probably get involved. I know that students are very involved with the issues that they feel very passionate about, so don't stay silent, get out there, not in a violent way, but try to get out there and maybe with other groups, learn about the issues, but don't stay in the sidelines, but really try to get out there. And I would say, either get their message across or be with others that support kind of the way that they feel about issues.
Great. Thank you for that message. And one final message I'll ask you to give is really to your media partners out there. Media plays such an important role. If there's a breaking emergency, if there's any sort of political piece, if there's any sort of event, we all turn to the media, whether it's radio, TV, etc. What sort of message would you like your fellow media partners to hear from you?
First of all, keep up the great work.
Yes.
But I think, they should take their responsibility very seriously. So, whether it's a news program or entertainment program, but it's like, try to maybe enlighten people that are watching, try to educate them as much as possible. I think that would probably be the biggest advice that I would give.
Great advice, Ben. Ben, thank you so much for spending time with us today,
Sure.
Sharing your story. Many people literally hear you every morning when they wake up, and now they get to see you in a different way. You have such great advice to share, and the work that you do, Ben, truly impacts the community. You really help inform and educate. You do it really brilliantly with such skill and dedication and passion and commitment. I just want to, on behalf of the community, thank you for your work and really appreciate that you spent time with us today.
All right, glad to be here. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Susan Salcido, Santa Barbara County Superintendent of Schools. Thank you so much for joining us today for this edition of Local Leaders.